Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics who write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Please welcome Betsy Wills, author of the book Your Hidden Genius, the science-backed strategy to uncovering and harnessing your innate talents. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I really enjoyed the book, and as I mentioned to you, I'm starting a unicorn launch pad here in Vietnam, and I think there's a lot of the value from your book that I could utilize for this launch pad. So we'll have to talk further about. But before we start on your book, could you give some history about how you got to where you're at right now?
Certainly. When I was 32, I was home with children and I decided to go back to work, but I didn't know quite what to do. I'd been in fundraising for Vanderbilt University, actually, before I stayed home. And then a friend recommended I do something called Johnson O'Connor, which is a very expensive aptitude assessment, which is what, of course, the book covers. And it launched me into my next career, which is I worked for a hedge fund and then in wealth management. But while at the hedge fund, we started, puzzling over the problem with education and how many people were misdirected. And we raised about $30 million and started U Science, which is what the book is based on. And that's been my passion ever since, both in avocations and in work.
And why did you write this book?
Well, most people do not understand that career guidance for all ages has been stuck in the Stone Age for ever. And that there is a new way based on technology to assess people based on their innate abilities and give them much better direction. So the book was a way to amplify that message.
I think these are incredibly accurate, these kinds of assessments. I used to use an assessment long ago out of Minneapolis called Profiles.
Mhm.
And I was amazed at how accurate that truly was.
Well, there's a whole science about this, as you know. Psychometrics is the official name of it, but it's gotten pretty good.
So you draw a bright line between aptitudes and everything people usually rely on, grades, IQ, skills, even popular personality tools. If I'm listening right now and thinking, okay, but I'm good at a lot of things, what's the simplest way to tell when I'm looking at an achievement versus a true underlying aptitude? And explain what aptitude really is.
Okay, so aptitude are there's basically 52, by the way, that we know we can measure objectively. In other words, you don't self-report them. So these are the things we're born with, and they come out in all of us between the ages of 2 and around 17 when we finish puberty. And aptitudes are basically innate abilities, like some people are able to see color in different ways. Like they recognize the difference between ivory and cream and cloud white in a paint store, for example. That's a simple example, but there's musical abilities that you can spot. There's also spatial ability. Some people think in 3D, other people don't. So you start seeing this in our children and in ourselves very young. And they're the things that drive us and make us motivated and to, move faster along the trajectory of learning in certain areas.
And how young can you recognize that? And at what age do you kind of um, pop out at that, like where it might not even be recognizable, or maybe somebody's missed this amazing talent and they don't find it till much later in life. How often does that happen?
Well, I mean, they're all there. They're sort of bubbling underneath us. So when you are tested, you're going to recognize it. It won't come as a shock, but it may come as a realization and confidence that you now can pursue things that you never thought of before. But our aptitudes start emerging, like I said, certain ones when we're about 2 years old. And those would be things like short term memory. Some people just, words and facts stick like glue in their head. They hear it once and they can repeat it. Other people may need to hear something 7 or 8 times before they can remember it. That's an aptitude, actually, short term memory. But other aptitudes like spatial ability might come out when you're age 4 and up. And then the more complex aptitudes actually maybe when we're about 14 or 15, things like inductive reasoning skills or sequential reasoning skills. So that whole array, can just naturally evolves up until we're about 17. But the really cool thing is our aptitudes don't change. So the metaphor I always use to explain this is that aptitudes are the seeds of our skills, not the skills themselves. Okay, so you may have an aptitude in 3D visualization, but unless you've taken an architecture class or an engineering class or something that's using it, even woodworking, you may not have developed it. So it does take practice to develop an aptitude, but those who have those certain aptitudes are going to be that much quicker to learn things that involve them. Okay, so I'd love to do a quick experiment actually with you, Marc, if you have a second.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Maybe your listeners will do this too. But if you have a pencil or if you have to imagine yourself with one and a piece of paper, I'd like you to write your name. Okay.
Okay. I'll,
Just,
I'll
just
use my phone.
yeah, everybody just write your name. Exactly. Well, yeah, with your hand, with your
Yeah,
dominant hand. And then
right.
when you're finished doing that, I'd like you to switch hands and write your name with your non-dominant hand.
Okay.
Okay. So how did that feel, writing with your non-dominant hand?
Um, Hard because I'm not used to doing it.
And how does the result look?
Just as bad as my dominant hand, which I
Okay.
can't read
We aren't
anyway.
using pens anymore. Well, anyway, what I'd say is if you lost the ability to use your dominant hand for a week or into the day even, and you had to use your non-dominant hand till the end of the day, you would get better with practice. And so the lack of an aptitude doesn't mean you can't improve with practice. But the fact of the matter is if you go through life using your non-dominant hand aptitudes, you're never going to be a calligrapher. Okay. You can get competent, but you're never going to be a calligrapher. So the idea of aptitudes is to understand what they are and to use the ones that are stronger because you're going to sail and learn that much faster using them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that why some people can switch it in baseball?
Some people can. Some people can. They're practicing a lot though, unless they're extraordinarily ambidextrous. Yes.
I love the Simone Gertz example. She
Yeah.
moves from chasing prestigious roles to embracing messy experimentation, and suddenly she looks more like herself and thrives. For someone who is competent but exhausted in their current job, which you hear quite often, especially
That's right.
doctors or lawyers,
Right.
what are the clearest signs they're overusing weaker aptitudes and starving their strongest ones? And what's the 1-2 degree pivot, and I put that in quotes, they can try before making a career leap?
Well, I'll use an example, for instance, of a lawyer. Okay. So the law is a big, broad category, and getting a law degree may require certain aptitudes, but there's an array of different ways to practice law. And so I always talk about if I have one unhappy lawyer I've talked to 40. That was really when the light bulb went off for me that everybody, needs to be understanding themselves better. But a lawyer, for instance, with a spatial aptitude that they're not using may feel burnt out or again exhausted by their work. But if they pivot their career to let me say I'm going to do more contract law in real estate, where I'm going to be able to somewhat make use of this 3D aptitude, they're going to be happier. Or patent law. So there are things we can do within the jobs that we are doing currently that will make us happier by revealing what that aptitude is and leaning towards it more. Now, sometimes, we're mismatched completely in our jobs, but that's really rare, honestly. And most jobs actually are fulfilling enough, but the cause of a lot of people's burnout and unhappiness is usually an unused aptitude that's sitting on the side and atrophying. So I'm a real promoter of hobbies because most of us have more aptitudes than our job will actually take advantage of or meet.
Yeah, I had a woman in my condo that she was in working in a pharmaceutical company, and realized she had an aptitude for drawing. and
Yeah.
she would draw people with their pets. And she started making as much money as she did as a mid-level executive at a pharmaceutical company, just doing that. And
I believe it.
yeah, and
She
she
found
found
her
like,
sweet spot.
yeah, yeah, and she really,
We talk to a lot of accountants who are find themselves frustrated. I will tell you too about job changes. Like today, the jobs we may have gotten into, the nature of those jobs is changing rapidly. And in the book, I talk about a woman who got into graphic design back when it was laying out pieces of paper on a board and pinning them together. Graphic design used to be much more tactile. And she learned to do graphic design on the computer using all the tools, but she really missed that tactile part. So rather than quit her job, which was paying her well, she made use of the tactile by taking up quilting. And then it became like she was in shows and doing all these things, just the same as you're talking about your friend. So
yeah,
we have to pay attention.
amazing stuff that can happen if you open your mind to it.
That's right.
You make a strong case that aptitude-based matching could make career guidance more accurate and even less biased. But you also warn that employers shouldn't use this data to filter out applicants, which I'm sure they absolutely would. So let me press on that. As AI-driven hiring and matching gets more powerful, what rules or guardrails do we need so the assessments stay empowering for individuals and don't become another tool for exclusion, which I'm sure that's what companies would use it for.
Well, I think that some people are using aptitudes in order to identify talent, and that's great. But like I said, you can learn to do anything with practice. You should never be excluded because of the lack of one, or or the presence of one in a strong way. But these aptitude assessments are meant for you. We're driving our own careers. We need to be owning and have authorship over our careers. So that's how they're meant to be used. But I think people are reverse engineering them to say, well, what do we want to look for to perform this job? And we know we need people who are spatial, or we know we need people who have high sequential reasoning, et cetera. So that matching part is helpful, but again, it should never be used to keep people out. It's all a way to invite people in.
As a reader, I love how you go out of your way to lower the anxiety around this assessment, because I
Yeah.
think assessments make people incredibly nervous because
Yeah.
they feel like it shows the worst of them. Why was it so important for you to frame it not as a test to ace, but as something closer to an MRI or looking glass? What usually shifts for people the moment they truly let go of their judgment?
Well, the truth is, there is no good or bad score in an aptitude assessment. So let me give you an example. I always think that helps. One of the aptitudes we measure is something called idea rate. So what we're measuring is the rate at which people come up with ideas. Nothing about the quality of the ideas, but simply the rate. So whenever your readers, your listeners take it, or you do, you'll see. I don't want to give away how we assess that, but you get your score, and it's going to be on a continuum. And people who come up with a rapid flow of ideas, they tend to enjoy things like public speaking, doing a podcast, writing, marketing, consulting, those types of activities. But you don't want your surgeon or your pilot necessarily to have a lot of ideas. And so when you see your scores on a continuum, it's not good or bad. It's typically unlocking opportunity for you and saying, hey, this is perfect if you go into careers that really this would be a distraction or not a good thing. So your combinations of scores, it looks more like a soundboard. The beautiful music is when you have a combination of scores that are, strong in certain areas and angles in others. So it truly is not good or bad. So that's why people should relax and enjoy it and just get the authentic score that they actually have on the assessment.
I know in Asia, the kids will be trying to game the system.
It's very difficult to do it. You can't. I mean, people don't even know what we're assessing. And we've assessed over 7.5 million people. And it's a
Yeah,
90-minute assessment. So this isn't a quickie personality test. This is actually an objective, scientifically created assessment that's been around, by the way, since the 1920s. It's quite old.
but incredibly accurate, right?
It is. Yeah, got a lot of proof points on that.
The story of McKenna is powerful. You have to explain who McKenna is, especially her experience of time flying during parts of the assessment for the first time in her life. What does this tell us about the connection between aptitude, engagement, and flow? And how can listeners use that insight before they see the results? So you have to tell them about this.
Well, I mean, she felt like she was sailing. She didn't even feel like the assessment was, she was like, what was so hard about that when she was in certain of the games? And, McKenna's story, I believe, is the one where she's finds out that she's got a mathematical ability. Isn't that correct? Am I in the right one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people have math phobia because either they have a bad teacher or they think math is higher math, like computational math. And we separate those two in the assessment. There's computational and applied math. And McKenna did not think she was a math person. So she took it and was shocked when she found out that she scored extremely high in the applied math section, which is really like statistics, trend analysis, data analysis. And so she all of a sudden opened herself up to exploring a major in data science, and she is loving it and really succeeding. So, what aptitudes reveal for us are opportunities opened up. We're encouraged to explore versus shut ourselves off to things that we've been socialized maybe to believe we can't do. So it's much more of a freeing thing and permission than it is. It doesn't shut you out; it opens up.
You're in Nashville, and doesn't it happen a lot for songwriters that they find out that they actually can sing their own songs?
Yes,
Uh, and some people who are great singers find out actually they do have an aptitude for actually writing their own content.
exactly. Yes, that's that idea generation typically at play, and some other aptitudes that are in the assessment. But yeah, music ability is also quite interesting. There's four separate aptitudes in music, and we talk about this in the book: tone, rhythm, pitch, and timbre. And those are four separate aptitudes that really are necessary to be in the music, world as a professional. So that's usually a surprise for people, but some songwriters are better at writing but not playing instruments, for example. And it's very easy to see that when I explain it, but most people lump it together as a career. And really, there's lots of opportunity for all aptitude patterns within music.
I mean, I think of Carole King for years writing everybody else's stuff and never even considering singing her own music and then becoming one of the world's best singers as well.
Exactly. Exactly. But again, it's back to permission.
Giving yourself permission.
Give yourself permission. Exactly. Give yourself permission. It's confidence and permission.
I think people are afraid of failure, right?
They really are, but there's no reason to be. I mean, I'd say I wish I had failed 10 times as much as I've allowed myself to. And I think as we get older, we give ourselves permission to do that more as well.
Yeah, we don't mind looking bad as we get older, unlike when we're younger.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Um, Once people open their results dashboard, they're often excited and overwhelmed. If someone is stating at their core four amplifiers, personality traits, and career matching thinking, where do I even start? They ask themselves. What's the first smart move you recommend to turn insight into a meaningful action rather than information overload?
Well, I will admit, I think this is an assessment, A, that you've invested 90 minutes in doing, and you can't game it. And the results are overwhelming. You're going to get a 50-page report just about your scores. But what I always say is there's a section that starts with personal approach. And this is really four of the aptitudes combined together that talk about really how you're going to show up at work and what you're going to really find the best environment to be and the best time frame to work within, goal setting, that type of thing. So I like starting there. Then when you get to the core aptitudes, which are, again, really the seeds of our skills, these are things you can deploy in different ways, but you're going to have to explore. So I would take the weight off of I've got to decide what I'm going to do and turn it into I want to explore really where my innate abilities are and what I might try out or what I might learn about these different careers that are suggested on the platform. So that's, I think, slowing down and doing some of the exercises that are recommended afterwards with your results, using AI tools to put in the information. That's a really powerful thing these days. It'll write your LinkedIn profile for you or help you do that, help you with your resume, all kinds of different things.
You open this section, chapter 3, about, and you were just gave us this example, us doing it together.
Yeah.
Dominant hand exercise, such as a simple metaphor, but it lands. When you explain aptitudes this way, what do you want listeners to stop doing in their careers and schooling, especially people who've been praised for grinding through things that quietly exhaust them?
Right. So there's a very popular book, which I do like, called Grit. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it, Angela Duckworth.
Yeah, I know her from Wharton.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I mean,
Excellent book.
it's a brilliant book, but I would take issue with part of it, and in the sense that I think that we have had this battle going on between nature and nurture in all of the world these days about, if you work hard, you're going to, achieve, and that's the best way to go. And we've sort of kicked nature to the curb. And nature is what is the partner of nurture. And so I think what we're trying to do here is just give people a clear picture of their nature so that they can spend that nurturing part on things that they're going to have a quicker uptake on and really enjoy. And the key word I'd say here is satisfaction. We're satisfied when we're motivated to do things that come naturally and easily. And it's just like a fish is not going to climb a tree. I know everybody knows that metaphor as well. We need to be focused on our nurturing our natures with a balance. So I love grit, but let's be choosy where we apply it.
Of course. What changed for you when you took the test?
Well, what I realized is that I had great analytical ability and I had marketing ability. So and working in finance was a great fit for me, but there was always going to be this unrest. And so I also had a very strong idea rate, and I also had artistic ability, artistic judgment. I'm not an artist, but so I was working in this hedge fund and enjoying that. But at the same time, I started a blog on art, for example. And it brought me so much satisfaction in my daily work to have this on the side. And I kept nurturing that and learning so much. And to be honest with you, it's where I had my biggest success. I probably had 1 million people on my blog that I was not charging for. And
Wow.
it gave me huge satisfaction. And I learned better about writing, and that's what led to the book. So I would just say, for me, it was opening it up, giving myself permission not to limit myself within my job, but to nurture things on the side that have thus led to a whole lot of other opportunities.
In the spatial visualization chapter, you show how 2020 Macy's Parade became a spectacular optical illusion built from the tiny recorded segments. It's basically a masterclass in 3D thinking. If someone's trying to figure out whether there's a 3D visualizer, space planner, or abstract thinker, what are
Mhm.
the most telling real life signals you'd listen for at work, at home, or even hobbies?
Well, I mean, my little test is who's putting the bike together Christmas Eve. Some people are completely baffled by a set of instructions to put something together, and other people almost don't need the instructions, for example. These are little clues. People who are always rearranging their office or their living room, or they care how the dishwasher is loaded, or how they pack a car. Those are tiny clues. But to confirm that, you really should take an aptitude assessment that measures this, because spatial ability is a huge driver. Not all of these aptitudes are created equal, and school does not identify spatial ability early enough. So we find that we lose a lot of talent for people who didn't realize they had 3D visualization. Because if you do have it, things like engineering, any kind of product representation, architecture, I mean, it's a whole world of careers that people may not examine or explore that they should be. that would be high paying, that would be very satisfying. So I'm always sad when I see people who have 3D visualization who are not using it in their daily life. So we talk about that in the book. It's really an itch that needs to be scratched.
Um, I really appreciated how you frame both sides of the continuum as valuable.
Mhm.
3D visualizers can struggle with abstract, heavy schooling, and abstract thinkers can struggle with directions or spatial tasks, but each brings a different kind of intelligence. What's your best advice for teams, managers, and teachers to design work and learning so these different visualization styles collaborate instead of clash?
Well, of course, we always talk about certain people like the lab more than the lecture. And if you're someone who's a 3D visualizer, you may be enjoying the lecture, it's fine, but you'd much rather be out there experimenting or doing something with your hands, a manipulative type of learning. So, I think learning styles and personalized learning are coming faster and faster these days. But the earlier we can sort of identify how someone takes in information and absorbs it, which has a lot to do with spatial ability, actually, we're going to be better off. But I don't think we've cracked that code yet. I think too often we reward for the abstract thinker in the traditional school setting, whereas the spatial visualizer can get left behind. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It's just they may find they're not as happy in that situation learning. So finding ways that they can be in more 3D settings or manipulative settings is really a balance we need to strike.
In chapter 4, you describe the idea generation as a continuum.
Mhm.
Brainstormers gush with ideas, concentrated focuses go deep on one, idea contributors keep things moving and refined. When
Yeah.
you're coaching readers, how do you help them recognize which mode is natural for them without labeling one as more creative or better or making them think that they can't be the other things?
Right. Well, again, we were measuring the rate at which you come up with ideas, not the quality of the ideas.
Right.
So sometimes I kind of call it aptitudes gone wild, where, for instance, in that idea generation, some people may dominate the conversation because they have tons and tons of ideas and they almost can't get them out fast enough. And the person who might be a concentrated focuser with the best idea may get quashed in the process. So on teams, we just talk about understanding who's what. And, a lot of times the idea generator needs a little coaching to seek out the concentrated focuser and say, do you want to sleep on that or come to me with your idea? We'd love to hear it, to give them the confidence to do that. But for example, concentrated focusers who are at the other end of this continuum, people like anesthesiologists are classic concentrated focusers. They go through hours and hours of boredom, with the patient, punctuated by emergencies, and they are able to do that. They're able to zero in. Golfers are often concentrated focusers. People who love yoga. We interviewed a Buddhist priest on the side who is an anesthesiologist by day. They have that ability to shut out the world, and it's hugely important in so many careers.
So we have some questions from the audience.
Great.
Is the assessment in the book?
Okay, so the assessment, let me just go back, was $1,000. You can still go take it in an in-person environment for $1,000 from a place called Johnson O'Connor. Our company raised this money and brought it into an online environment, and it's called Use Science. And the book includes a unique code to take the assessment online. So it's free with the book, which is I think $13 on Amazon. So what we did was democratized the assessment so that more people could have access, and that's why we're in so many universities and high schools across the world now, used as their career platform. But it's really, the book is, I wrote it so that every age could have access to this. We're all in a world where we're pivoting and zigzagging. The world's changing very fast, and there's never been a more important time to have a great career management tool. And so that's what the book is for.
Another question from the audience. Do you think entrepreneurs
We lost our leader. So,
I think he's on mute.
Sorry, I lost you
There you
all.
go.
It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I lost you all. So let me go back and get the questions that folks had here. My apologies, my internet went off. Do you think entrepreneurs are born or made? Are there any natural abilities that successful entrepreneurs have? If yes, what are they?
Well, first of all, I think anyone can be an entrepreneur, but I think successful entrepreneurs are people who understand how to build teams and understand what they're bringing versus what their necessary elements are to make whatever their enterprise is successful. There definitely are, though, some signals of people who would enjoy entrepreneurialism. I would say there's an assessment on sequential reasoning. I'm sure you know about that. In the book, we talk about that a lot, which is really about people who create systems. And a lot of entrepreneurs are able to create systems where there wasn't one before. They don't really need a template to create a new system. That's one clue that they may be someone who enjoys entrepreneurialism. Of course, having lots of ideas is good, but there's one key assessment called time frame orientation that is in the battery that is looking at your ability to imagine possibilities. And it is connected to creativity, but it's not the traditional creativity. It's about imagining possibilities. So people who score as future focusers, which is one end of this continuum, tend to like to think about things on the bleeding edge. And I define entrepreneurialism often as people who are able to do that. And they think in terms of things that are 10 to 12 years out. So they naturally are oriented that way. So it is an asset, but it doesn't mean if you don't score exactly like that way, you can't be an entrepreneur. But those are some of the things we could identify that do help people or tend to signal that they may enjoy something entrepreneurialism that's entrepreneurial.
How are employers, another question from the audience, how are employers using keywords based on aptitudes to scan resumes using AI? And you talked a little bit about this in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer to that, so I don't want to say that. But I will say employers are using this in their training programs. So, I've done programs for Dell Computer, Amazon, that type of thing, where they've got their new employees and they use it to help the employee navigate their own future within the company. So it's not immediate, but it's that first tool of orientation, self-awareness, discussion, so that, if, for instance, if you find out that you are someone who's a visual scanner, that's one of the things we assess, people who notice typos very easily. You may want to advocate to do more work that's clerical in nature, or involves a lot of detailed paperwork or detailed work like that, analytical work. If you found out that isn't one of your aptitudes, you may want to say, I'm not the person in the meeting to take the notes or to always be checking the PowerPoint. That's going to be slow me down. So it's all about how you advocate for yourself at work, how you, choose sections of a company to work more in, like logistics or marketing or sales. We can't identify that kind of thing. And so it helps people advocate for themselves. And that's how companies are using it, as well as to do teamwork exercises to see where the team dynamics may be failing, where they might improve, just understanding one another to build the best teams.
Yeah, by the way, one of the listeners just downloaded the book on Audible. Is the Audible book still have the assessment?
Yes, it will tell you. I'll just tell everybody on page 29. It's included in the book, and it'll tell you how to put the code in. Everybody goes to yourhiddengenius.com, and then it says redeem assessment, and the instructions should be there. And if not, you can, contact the help desk. But I haven't had many people have that problem. But if you do, contact the help desk, and you'll be right into the assessment.
Another question from the audience. There's a lot of evidence nowadays that our boys and young men are falling behind. And now there are more women in college than men, and now women have just surpassed men in wealth as well. Do you have any comments on this?
I do. I do. I could go on and on about this, but it does. One of the symptoms, I think, it comes down to spatial ability. We do know that more men are spatial than women. Okay. Now, however, the assessment with all the millions of people we've assessed, we know we've unearthed more women with spatial ability who didn't know they had it. And that's a good thing. But statistically, there is a lean towards more spatial. So a lot of young men uh, do not like school because it's so lecture based, and they should be given more opportunities to encourage or use that spatial ability at younger ages. So I think that's one of the problems, and I think another problem is that school is built for very much of a lecture mentality versus more variety, and I think a lot of boys need that to stay motivated at school. But I'm not the expert on that, but I would say that's one symptom, and it's very real.
Uh, when you have a child who's struggling in school and
Mhm.
not sure where they fit in, especially in high school,
Yeah,
where there's so much peer pressure, how
yeah.
much can an assessment like this give them hope for a brighter future?
Well, we have so many examples of that and videos of people, whole classrooms of people taking the assessment and then getting their results, and you can see the entire class. I mean, I have a video of the entire class like sitting up straighter and going, "Wait, what?" Because they're surprised when they see what their results are, and it's very positive. And I think what we suffer from is not a talent gap in our world, but really an exposure gap. So they'll get career suggestions they've never heard of, mechatronics engineer. Who knows what that is, and they're like, wait, I could do that. Something with the word engineer next to it. Or, there's all kinds of things that come up that are fits for them. And the reason they are so engaged with it is because they were not able to game the assessment. And so they've gone through a rigorous game like exercises that they don't even know what was being assessed. And so when they get their results, they tend to believe it in a very different way than something that's self reported, like a personality assessment or the interest test that's been given since the 1960s that was cheap to deliver. And by the way, it wasn't a plot. Like, why was this? People ask me that all the time. Like, why were we only using tests that were self report? Technology just didn't, we were playing Pong in 1995. There wasn't a way to time people through a rigorous objective assessment. So it's a new day, and it's really exciting.
And it's only going to get better, right?
Only going to get better. I hope there'll be a blood test for this someday. We won't even have to go through the 90 minutes, but I don't think we're there yet.
Uh, oh, that'd be pretty awesome.
It would be.
The
Somebody out,
Pat
one of your
Shea
entrepreneurs can invent that.
The Pat Shea prison story is a perfect example. You have to tell who Pat Shea was, of someone who comes alive when the situation demands improvisation. For listeners who don't naturally wing it, what do you recommend they do when they are put on the spot so they can show up powerfully without pretending to be a brainstormer?
Well, I would say, okay, so this is the story about a woman who finds out she has to give a hour-long talk about 5 minutes before she's on the stage. She had no idea. She thought she was being invited to accept an award, but there was a whole crowd of people who were waiting to hear her talk for an hour. And she was a natural brainstormer. And so she was able to extemporaneously and improv, talk on the fly about a topic that she already knew. But she didn't need notes or something like that to do it. In fact, she enjoyed it. And that's playing into that idea rate that she had, as well as her sequential reasoning, which allowed her to, organize her thoughts in her head and deliver it. But people who may not have that strong ability, maybe they're a concentrated focuser, really it's about rehearsal and practice. And all of us, if we practice giving a speech enough, like a TEDx talk like you did and I did, we can do it, but it is going to require more effort and time invested than someone who just naturally has this ability. That being said, there's excellent public speakers who just spend a lot of time practicing. So you're just learning that would be the key to your success. It doesn't cut you out of the game, but they're not going to love ever standing up on the fly and having to give a talk. I mean, that's just the truth of it. I don't know if anybody really does, but under pressure, she could.
I'm good with that for
Are you?
myself. I tell them
Well,
you could just drop me off an airplane and hand me the topic on the way down, and I'm good.
Well, and a lot of teachers have this as well, and podcasters. You probably, Mark, enjoy the Q&A better than even the talk. When someone
For
throws a
sure.
zinger at you, you're going to go over here and draw it on the board if you're not getting them that way, or do an interpretive dance, but you're going to find a way to reach your audience. I know.
Yeah, but what really scares me more than anything is when someone comes walking toward me and I'm terrible with names. That's when I'm in total panic.
Okay, and that comes down to associative memory, actually. Some people can, if you'd never met them before, or if you'd met them and don't remember, which is it when you say that? Like you think you should know
I,
their name?
I may even have met them 5 times and I
Okay.
can't remember the name, but I can remember everything about them.
Okay, so
And
I suffer from the same, and that's actually associative memory. Um, that person who remembers everybody's name, and every time they see a
yeah,
movie, they can remember who the stars were and everything. Okay,
yeah.
that's a gift, and it helps people. But people who don't have it, which this assessment, one of the exercises reveals, and I don't have it, they tend to have a little bit harder time with foreign languages. Sometimes if it's taught in a certain way, they want to learn in an immersion situation versus off a book. That's how our brains work. But the way I would coach someone like you or me who don't necessarily have associative memory in a strong way, and when you're in that situation, I introduce myself to people and I say, you know what, I'm apologize ahead. I'm really poor with remembering names, but I love, I can remember that you had the bike that was so cool or whatever. So there's
That's what
workarounds.
I do.
Yeah. So there's workarounds. So
That's exactly what I do.
yeah. And this
I
book
mean,
gives you the power and coaching to do that because it's not going to change. It's not going to
yeah,
change.
I mean, I had a guy get very upset, and then I start ticking off everything I knew about him, and then he was just stared at me. He said, "And you remember all that, but you can't remember my name."
Correct.
No,
Correct.
yeah.
It really
Um,
is an aptitude. Yeah.
Question from the audience: what do you think of IQ tests? Do you think high score of IQ really shows ability to learn faster and better? Do you think IQ test has any value in 2026?
I do not. I do not. I think the IQ has really, it is a cognitive assessment. And I'm not an expert on this, but I did a lot of reading before I wrote this book because we wanted to address this in some way. IQ is an addition of scores of cognitive ability, but you could have, for example, a 90 in one area and a 20 in another. So when you say you've got this IQ, it really doesn't tell you that much. If you have the individual different scores, which this assessment is some cognitive abilities, you're going to see that, but not all by any stretch. IQ has done a lot of damage because it's too limiting. I'm not really exactly going to say this is about multiple intelligences because that's slightly different, but there's so many things that we discount or don't give ourselves credit for that are dream killers for ourselves. And so IQ to me, maybe has some value, but I don't think it's that applicable today. And I think we should be much more open to all these various abilities versus just IQ. I don't know if
I
I'm
think it
causing
brands.
controversy in your
I
audience,
think
but
it.
yeah.
No, I think it brands people, and then they think that if they don't have a high IQ, I mean, I'm like a vegetable when they measured my IQ, not even a smart vegetable. And so I can see some people will take that to heart and feel like, well, that's it. I can't accomplish anything. This is as good as I'm going to get.
Well, we're going to miss a lot of
Um,
talent if we think that way. So go ahead.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
You bring AI into the conversation and call out the difference between idea quantity and idea quality and the
Mhm.
ethical risk of a tool that's eager to please. In a world where generative AI can produce infinite options, What does good idea generation look like now, and how should brainstormers, idea contributors, and concentrated focusers use AI differently to stay authentic and effective?
Well, I think idea generation, if you are, I don't know what tools people use exactly, but for instance, ChatGPT, someone who has a high idea generation and spits a bunch of things into ChatGPT to try out, they're going to end up with even more and more and more ideas. They're going to struggle, though, always with how do I choose the idea? Their minds may race. There's just so many ideas they could generate. And concentrated focusers and idea contributors tend to be a little bit more selective because they're not as overwhelmed by that. But I will say for a concentrated focuser, if they need to come up with various ideas, it's a good tool. I think that's not the best use of AI. Generating ideas. I think that's never really the problem. I think it's more about execution of ideas. So
Yeah, I think the same.
yeah.
In chapter 5, you open with Stanislav Petrov, an almost unthinkable high stakes moment where pattern recognition, and in quotes, this doesn't add up, saved lives. When you teach inductive reasoning, how do you separate useful gut instinct from dangerous overconfidence, especially under pressure?
Okay, so inductive reasoning, which I don't know how many of your listeners have done the connections game on the New York Times, but it's where you have six pictures in this case, and you choose the three that go together. And what we're assessing there is your ability to make decisions out of disparate pieces of information that are new, novel decisions under time pressure, all three of those things. And some people are very comfortable doing that. They were told their whole lives they have a good gut. They've never met a problem they didn't like. They love to find a pattern. They love to figure out who done it. If they're reading a mystery novel first, they love that. The other end of that continuum, people we call fact checkers, are the people who really are thorough researchers. But they may be hamstrung for analysis paralysis. Like they may look at 27 toothpaste reviews on Amazon before they'll decide. So you've got the whole stretch there. But on teams, we need all of those. Fast decision makers, comfortable with ambiguity, ER doctors, Wall Street traders, people who like that time pressure decisioning. Fact checkers on the other end of the continuum, and of course, we've got a whole range in between. They tend to be people who love risk management, or they'll do the background check when they're hiring someone. They're very good at that. So it's all about where you're most comfortable. But diagnostic problem solvers, who are those people who are strong inductive reasoners, they actually have a harder time because they may make impulsive decisions because they think they're good at making decisions, but they need the background behind them to do really excellent decisions. So if you think about an ER doctor, they like the environment of fast decision making, but they've been to school for 7 years and done their internship, et cetera. So when they're actually in that ER, they can pull all those things from the drawer very quickly and diagnose. But if that same doctor went to trade healthcare stocks on Wall Street and was overconfident because they were a doctor, they could do that, they're going to be in trouble. So it's understanding where you fall and then what to do with it that this reveals. It's again, motivation is sold separately, aptitudes are free, motivation sold separately, and learning is separate. So aptitudes are going to reveal where you're going to learn fastest. The next is up to you.
Is this a good system to use for NFL, like professional sports teams to evaluate players that they bring on, especially in positions where they have to make quick decisions like quarterback or point
Definitely.
guard in basketball, or even coaches to learn more about them?
Definitely. I think it's been used a lot in that situation, actually. Not to keep anybody out again, but you're going to see that some people are just thriving when they're in situations where there's time pressure. They love it. It's just a really natural thing for them. So they tend to like sports that require that. But things like golf may not require a quick decision. It might require more analytical abilities, for example. So it would depend on the sport, but it does tell you a lot about how people enjoy those hobbies and do well with them. Yes.
Another from the audience. If you believe being smart, in quotes, can be defined by words, what would be your definition of a smart person?
Self-aware. That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone has genius. That's why I call the book Your Hidden Genius. And we know that. And so it's really about what are you doing with the gifts you've been given? You've got this whole wad of ability. What are you going to do with it? And self-awareness is the key.
Hence why I like the book was the title was really what grabbed me. Because I get 3 to 5 pitches a day. So this is what grabbed me for your book.
Thank you.
Um, uh, in the chapter 5 frames a spectrum, diagnostic problem solvers who move fast, fact checkers who need more date and
Nita.
time, investigators who manage pace and balance. In real workplaces, these styles often clash. What are your practical team rules you recommend so these three types make better decisions together instead of irritating each other? I mean, I think they need to learn more about what each is responsible for and how they work.
Right. I mean, we need to first be able to name these things as what they are, because you've got a lot of conflict on teams when you've got a fact checker and they're feeling pushed, or a diagnostic problem solver who might have bad habits of, for instance, creating a crisis or a mini crisis because they love the time pressure decision. So, they get a problem and they're like, we got to decide this today. Okay. Well, in fact, most problems are not time pressured. There's very few jobs that really need that time pressure decisioning. So that diagnostic problem solver needs to be aware of that, or they need to go on a game show, something with a buzzer that's going to go off, or play games that use it, because they do have a need to use it. But there's appropriate places and times. Now, certain moments in a company, for example, you got to make a decision and move on. And that diagnostic problem solver needs to be relied on and trusted to do that. But the other example, for instance, is let's say we're going to hire someone. You can't sum up a person in a few data points. So, that fact checker is going to be a lot more careful in thinking about a hire and contribute that to the team as well. So it's the role and the time and place, but the awareness is what makes a powerful team, and having a language to talk about it amongst one another instead of having a lot of personal grudges or thinking, there's power struggles, etc. There are words for this.
You warned that inductive reasoning can backfire, seeing patterns where none exist, especially in crisis, deep fakes, and misinformation. What habits do you want readers to build so they can keep the speed advantage of induction while protecting themselves from false patterns? I think this is a big concern of the populace worried about how the government uses technology.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that in a rich way for you, but I would just say, we do talk about again, I call it aptitudes gone wild, that some diagnostic problem solvers, to everything looks like a problem because they like solving problems. And so there are some, that tend to move to conspiracy theories, or they think everything's, some kind of puzzle to be solved, where it's a lot more simple than that. So it again is situational. I wouldn't want to over comment on that, but I think the speed of information we're getting, et cetera, gives us a lot of data points that we think might need to be combined into a solution of some sort, or false positives. So we have to be careful about the integrity of the information that we're choosing amongst.
Um, you open the Yeti coolers lost at sea story and Captain Ben Day's obsession with planning 3 ports ahead. What does the example reveal about sequential reasoning as a calamity prevention skill? What do most people underestimate about logistic style thinking?
Well, there are some people in sequential reasoning, which is one of the assessments. We're looking at some people make decisions and create logic in their head, and other people are very reliant on tools like, calendars and systems, that type of thing. Systems are really, really important. Sequential reasoners create those systems in their head, and people who are at the other end of that continuum tend to they maintain systems very well. And all of this is incredibly important in a company. So you think about scaling a company, you have to have systems in place that have been communicated to everyone. And in the case of the Yeti coolers, what we're talking about is the importance of actually loading a freighter, and that there's a system involved in that, because you're unloading it at one port, and you have to have the items sequentially put into the freighter in order to take it out first or second or last. It's just a big metaphor for how we create systems and logic. But on teams, this is a critical one, because however you fall on this continuum will tell you a lot about how much communication is really important, and how we have to practice that. Because if you're making decisions in your head, you might assume other people are mind readers. That's, sort of, again, aptitude's gone wild. I'm not saying everybody who's a sequential thinker does that, but it's a trap they can fall in. So within the book, you're going to find your scores, and there's going to be, the huge assets that you can take advantage with your score, but also the challenges. And so everyone's scores will include both, as well as a bunch of hobbies that you might take advantage of to fulfill you.
Here's the last question for you.
Okay.
You lay out 3 career stages: explorers, builders, pros, and argue that career fit and priorities change over time. I think so too, as being 65 now.
Yeah.
What's one high leverage move you'd advise for each stage that helps people stay plugged in to their hidden genius, even if they can't change jobs right now?
Right. I would say the highest level thing is to, as my example with the art blog tells you, is to nurture your aptitudes in your hobbies and your avocations and your volunteer work all the way through. There's no back burner. Don't fall into the trap of thinking someday I'll do that, because you're going to never feel like you're fully satisfied in your work. You will always feel like something's missing. You may put your job on the witness stand. You may quit a job which doesn't need to be quit. There's lots of traps you can fall into because you're dissatisfied. But the first place to look is at your aptitude pattern and ask yourself, what is not being nurtured right now? And can I accept that? I'll end by saying that in the book, we quote at the end a tribe in Nevada that, for example, does not ask their young, what do you want to be when you grow up? Instead, what they ask is, what do you want your medicine to be to bring to the world? It's a much broader question than our work. It's much, much broader. And I hope that people, when they read the book, take away not only a better view of themselves, but a willingness to stop viewing other people as a flawed version of them. And that's what we tend to do naturally. I think school has sort of created that in some ways. I love school, but we need to kind of turn this around and realize the value and the hidden genius in everyone.
Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I love the book. I think it's very helpful, and especially for parents where their kids are struggling, to have them take this assessment, especially it's so inexpensive with the book, so it can help the kids, give them hope for where they fit, because everybody has, as you said, hidden genius. And it's good to know what you're good at, because you feel good every day about doing what you're good at.
And you are doing very well at what you do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone.